next guest is Jeremiah Boucher. I could talk to this guy for hours on end because he has done a ton in real estate, and he now is running a couple different funds, and Patriot Holdings is one of the main funds. But I've heard his story, and I think it's really inspiring because, as everyone knows, I'm pretty anti-school and anti-college. And so your story is just really inspirational for people that maybe think that they can't fit into school, or they're just not, up to speed with everybody else. And this is living proof that you don't have to do any of that stuff to make it big. And so glad to have you on today.
Yeah. Thanks, Sean. Thanks for dinner.
Yeah.
A+ experience, man. Houston's great.
Just tell us a little bit about where you are today, and then, maybe we can rewind it and see how you got there.
Yeah. So right now I got 5 funds. I started in real estate 20 years ago, 400 million assets under management. I have about 100 assets mixed within self-storage, manufactured housing, and small bay industrial. And raised about 150 million in capital, and from accredited investors, just hustling over the years and building up relationships. So right now, really, it's been a focus on storage, development of storage, and the manufactured housing asset class. Those are really the core focus.
Manufactured housing is mobile home parks.
Yeah. The fancy way.
Yeah. So for people that don't know what that is.
Yeah. Land lease communities, though. So we only own the land. I don't typically own the homes. Yeah, and I bought those, I've bought hundreds, 300-400 different deals in parks.
Okay. And so you guys develop the land and then lease space to either the homeowner or a company?
We're doing our first development now in mobile home parks. That's a very challenging strategy. We focus mostly on value add. So buying, improving, and exiting.
Okay. All right, sweet. So give us a little bit of backstory on how you even got into real estate, or, where did you start?
Yeah. Talking to you, kind of somewhat of a similar background there. So growing up, tough home because my parents were 17 and 20 when they had me. My dad was trying to get his paving business off the ground. He was a real, a knucklehead, out partying, and my mom was just trying to go to college, trying to get by, putting me to any different childcare place that she could, aunts, uncles, and they were in New Hampshire, so I was born up in the Northeast. And at that point, it didn't work out. My parents were obviously young and didn't know what they were doing. So my mom packed up, left my dad, went out to Vegas. My grandparents were there for the test site. He worked for Raytheon. So I grew up in Vegas, and at that point, she married a guy that was a military guy, also from the test site out there. Tough upbringing in terms of strict. Everything had to be perfect, very critical. I mean, it taught me a lot of discipline. It taught me to take pride in everything that I do. It's a reflection. What I do is a reflection on me. So that kind of formed me into this obsessive, goal-driven guy, which has its pros and cons. And I know you live that way too, where it's hard to stop. Like my mind is always on to the next opportunity, trying to achieve more, trying to control everything around me. So it's been a process growing up through this. And I got into real estate when I was right out of high school. I thought I was going to be an athlete. Short, slow, white guy. Couldn't make it into any football program that was better than junior college. So I went to Reno, University of Nevada, Reno. I did rugby up there, and that was really the only sport where you could just be an animal and not that talented or gifted in order to be decent. But I mean, that, running around with shorts right up my butt and 10-degree weather on an ice field, that was brutal. And yeah, you got to be tough. So you don't wear sweatpants, you don't wear anything. So that was atrocious. So I figured out, this is not for me. Did my stint in bodybuilding. I was up to 200 pounds and 5'8", was pushing big weights. And eventually, though, I just noticed that I was just doing everything to compensate for not feeling good about myself and feeling insecure and feeling just angry I felt like angry, now looking back, doing so much self-work. Like, my father loves me, but just angry that he wasn't there, that he doesn't acknowledge me. He doesn't really care, and he does, but he just doesn't know how to show me that. And then also with the overbearing stepfather, where I'm in a house where it's so stressful all the time, I'm always on pins and needles, and I just want to break away. Like, I just want to be free. I don't want to be in this house. I don't want to be around that. And it drove me so bad to want freedom, when freedom from not just struggling 9 to 5, getting a paycheck with someone hanging a noose over my head, telling me how to act, telling me where to be, telling me where I can go. And I knew from a very early age, my father, my biological father, he's an entrepreneur. My grandfather he was a vacuum salesman. He was taking produce from New Hampshire and shipping it down to Boston. And he was doing that in the 50s. And my dad was an entrepreneur. So my identity was like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. Like, that's my life. And I grew up working for him behind a paver. So his paving company is small. And I was raking, shoveling, wheelbarrowing, learning how to run the paver in the back and driving trucks. And I realized real quickly, I'm never going to get ahead in this business if I'm doing manual labor. And the business isn't big enough for both of us, with me and my dad. And I didn't want to, we butted heads. I didn't want to live that life. So
I think that's pretty similar to a lot of young men. They have the same kind of angry at life in general, right?
Yeah.
I had the same issues, and which kind of leads into probably not making some of the smartest decisions.
No.
Drinking, fighting, partying.
Exactly.
Which I have no idea why, but I think most young men end up going through that at some point.
Yeah.
And so I think hearing your story is going to relate to a ton of people, because how did you end up like overcoming that anger and all the other stuff that you were dealing with at the time?
Yeah, I think the thing right when I was graduating high school and not having that path ahead, like the Bible says, if a man doesn't have a vision, they perish. I knew it. I was coming up against this wide open world that you're thrown out there, and there's no safety nets. Like, I'm never going to live with my parents, and I couldn't work for my dad the rest of my life. So it just was like, okay, sink or swim right now. So I just decided, I got to go figure this out. And I read a course, a real estate course by Carlton Sheets. It was called No Money Down. And
I remember that.
Yeah. It was an infomercial thing. My dad had it in his attic. He never opened it. I opened it, and I just immersed myself in it, because I go, you don't need any money, and you can actually own assets and create a wealth and actually be a business owner without coming from anything.
Was it a wholesaling program?
It was really a comprehensive program about buying and cash flowing, wholesaling, lease options, owner financing, like all the good stuff that actually gave me the idea for creativity for the future. And that's why I actually wrote a book about it. It's called Finding Your Edge, How to Win at the Game of Commercial Real Estate. I do the Audible too, and I go into all these stories. But that was my edge, is like learning, how can I structure creative deals? How can I get to them first? What can I do different that's not popular right now? And that's what led me to the mobile home parks.
That's amazing. I always hear about people investing in them, and I've invested in pretty much every kind of real estate, but never in a mobile home park. Not yet. I need to learn from you. I just don't. I've never met somebody that is really experienced in it, and so I don't have the knowledge of what probably it would take. I mean, I would think it's similar to storage, where everybody's paying X, and then you're going to try to increase the value with the rents, right?
Yeah.
So
it's
same
affordable
concept.
housing. So yeah, same thing as low income or middle income apartments. There's a wide range. You're going to get the worst quality. Here I've been all over Texas looking at hundreds of parks, and they can be really, really rough. And then you can get 5-star, really nice retirement parks. So I think that edge, like learning what that edge was for me, is what every young man or woman in business, they need to figure out right away. And we were talking about that last night, about what does someone need when they're starting out to help them be successful when you don't have a mentor, you don't have a model, you don't have experience, you don't really know a lot about business. And, reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, like we talked about, is understanding at least the basics of financial intelligence, that if you don't own assets, you'll never be wealthy, period. I mean, you can earn earned income for the rest of your life, but you're going to get whittled away in taxes. And if you don't invest it, you're always subject to getting that next check coming in from what you do.
Yeah, even if you have a high-paying career, you could still be living the same way. Just paycheck to paycheck, and you might have a little bit of 401k at the end of your career, but you're never going to have like the wealth and the retirement freedom that you could have when you're building it with either real estate or some other asset.
That's it. And I saw it with my grandfather. He had a flower shop, and they ran it for years, and then Amazon came along and everything.
Yep.
Walmart has flowers, everywhere has flowers, online delivery. So he died with not much at all. My grandmother is stuck.
Yeah, it's the opposite what everyone thinks. So whenever nowadays, because social media kind of glorifies all this stuff, they think everyone's a millionaire and everyone makes all this money. But the majority of small businesses actually don't really even make much money at all, or just enough to pay the bills.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in putting away maybe $100,000, I mean, that's not going to help her survive. And now she has dementia. So it puts a lot of pressure on the rest of the family. But the reason I bring that story up is because they were looking at apartment buildings in Nashua, which is near Boston, and they could have bought apartment buildings for $5-10 a door, $20,000 a door, and they're $400,000 or $500,000 a door at some places. So, and he just kept one. He didn't bring on any partners. He didn't want to bring on anyone else in his business because he wanted all the control all the time. Which there's a place for that. And then two, it was just fear, like just fear of saying, what if I make a mistake? What if there's too much maintenance and I spend all my time? He worked all the time anyway, so it wouldn't have mattered. He would have done that too. So I just look back and it's like, I don't want to make that same mistake. And I saw my dad doing the same thing, just working his business, not doing real estate. And I realized, you make your money in business, period. Like my business was real estate, and we'll get into that, where I found deals, sourced them, get a piece of equity, got a fee. But my business was creating sales in real estate. But any business like you, multiple businesses, and I love your story, channeling all that income into real estate. So business gets you rich, real estate keeps you rich, and then gets you a lot more rich over time.
And allows you to actually take home more money because you're avoiding, you're paying a lot less income tax. So you can actively write off a lot of depreciation and cost segregation. But it's just been a huge tool for me over my 25-year career as to really build wealth and just have creating equity, creating depreciation. And so just huge tax advantages. And for that reason only, even if you didn't have any appreciation, just by doing that and then having a cash flowing building over time is going to be, like you said, buy it for $5,000 or $10,000 a door. It's going to be worth $500,000 a door at some point.
That's it.
Yeah.
So the big step is like, how do you get money to be able to go invest in real estate and create that generational wealth? And we were talking about it last night. Is you got to know sales. Yep. And that was the thing. So when I was in college, I had to earn money, and I worked about a week at a in the meat cutting department of Sam's Club in the back with a lot of old ex-cons. And I'm like, man, this sucks. Like I hate this job. It's freezing, and it was a 9-to-5 grind. And I immediately went, okay, I got to go get out of my comfort zone and do sales. A couple buddies from high school were doing ADT security sales. So I carried this blue little sign, and I would walk in the ghettos of Vegas on the east side and just knock those doors, and did that for months and months, and learned how to take a lot of rejection, learn how to get out of my comfort zone, learn how to talk and present to people, learn how to handle objections. And that was such a valuable lesson for me, because I took that, and as soon as I found real estate, and I knew I don't know anything about the game of real estate, so I'm going to be a realtor so I can learn contracts, I can learn financing, title, all this stuff. Took that and just worked it in real estate, where I hit the doors. I door knocked, I cold called. I didn't want to be passive. Like I want to be active. Like I'm a very excitable guy, and I got a ADD myself, and just I got to be moving. So doing that and being able to sell and talk and listen and present, that is like the most critical skill I think any young person can get in order to start adding value to the market to get money in return.
I would agree with that for sure.
Yeah.
So sales is the number one skill for definitely a young guy. That would be, it's going to benefit him for the rest of his life, no matter what he decides to do.
That's it. And it's not as complex as people make it. And salespeople get a real bad rap that, you're trying to manipulate somebody or you're trying to be pushy. And there's that type of sales. But nowadays, a lot of people, I think they're more attuned. That stuff doesn't work. When you're phony and you're just trying to pressure close somebody
short term,
just it doesn't work, right? Yeah. And then the relationship is killed, and you can't get any reoccurring sales. But I actually started with a real estate trainer. His name's Mike Ferry, and his kids are in the business. They're real big trainers. Tom Ferry's his son. But he was an old school sales guy under the school of thought under Earl Nightingale. He wrote this old program in the 50s. It was the best self-improvement program that was ever released on a record. It was called The Strangest Secret. And it was basically, what you think is who you become. But he was just adamant, like, if you don't get up and make 50 to 100 calls, then you're a piece of crap, you know? So it's like, for me, I always knew I gotta be active and get out there and not push paper around and hide behind my desk. I gotta go hustle. I gotta build relationships no matter, even if I don't know what I'm doing. So new people, I think they start out in any business or industry, and I'm sure you were the same, you gotta wing it. I mean, you gotta get educated, take some type of course or some framework around it, and then get out there and hustle. And then you're going to actually know how to navigate. You don't learn unless you do.
It's taking action. And
taking
I think
tons
that's where people get stuck, is they go, well, it's not perfect time. It's not perfect this. And you're never going to learn that way.
Never.
You just got to like jump in and figure it out along the way. That's how I've always learned.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's a tough process, man, especially as a guy that's broke and you're just trying to find your place in the world.
Yep.
You know, and then the best thing you can do is at least find that vehicle, where real estate for me was like, okay, I'm going to stick with this, because I see people now with social media and young people, and they ask me, how do you get ahead, or what should I do with my first 10 grand? They bounce around to so many different things because it looks attractive to everybody else out there, e-commerce sales, or, you know, doing any type of unique business. But if you don't stick to something and give it, I really think it takes 7 years to just get a really good framework around what you're doing, right? And then my first 7 years, I wasn't even that successful. And that, I mean, I did all right. I made a couple $100,000 in commissions, but I was doing my taxes wrong. Half of it was going away. I didn't know about depreciation.
Back to the meatpacking job. And were you a realtor on the side, or you were just working at the meatpacking?
I quit that quickly.
Okay.
Yeah. Did the home sales, the ADT
oh, that's right.
sales. Then, yeah, I did my last summer in construction with my dad in New England, and I thought, you know what, I gotta change. And I took the test 3 times to get the realtor license, failed it. On the 4th time, I finally got it. So I'm not the sharpest guy, and then was able to start in sales. But then it was a really scary place, because I looked like I was about 13 years old when I started, and I had no contacts. My friends all came from lower income and kind of the rough, just a blue collar area of Vegas and Henderson. And I had to get out there and create a sale. And that was the hardest thing to do. And doing the door knocking was a slow process, the cold calls. And in my book, I talk about it. My edge, I figured out, you know, because I was bodybuilding, and there was a pretty decent sized gay community in Vegas. And there was only one realtor in the magazine. And some guy told me, hey, you know, this is a pretty good market here. You should target this market. So I put an ad in there, and I like said, I'm serving the gay community. I'm happy to help you find a house. And I'm not gay, but I thought this could be an angle where there's no one else in this space. So then I luckily got a call, and this was after about 8 months of no commissions. I was running real low on cash.
Well, guys with no wife and no kids, pretty good space for people that have money, right?
That's right. Yeah. They can buy some houses.
Yep,
yeah,
exactly.
So those crazy stories I talk about in the book about all the places that took me and the weirdos that are out there. But at the end of the day, I was able to build some good connections, and I had a girlfriend at the time, and it was Christmas, and it was really getting tight. And I was wondering, man, am I gonna be able to survive here? Because I need money, and my parents they're not gonna give me money. They don't have any. And I was reading Think and Grow Rich, and I just kept doing that exercise in there, you know, like, what are you going to give in return for the wealth that you're going to create? And there's this mantra thing, and I would just say it in the shower over and over. And it's like, and I just wanted to get like $3,000 a month to cover my bills, you know. And it goes like, I'm right on track to getting $3,000 a month in personal positive cash flow. In return for this money, I'm going to find and call sellers 6 days a week until I find the person that needs my services the most. I'm committed to this goal, 1, because it gives me the time to spend with my friends, my family, the people I love, the woman I love. 2, the opportunity to contribute, to change people's lives, man, to make a better place for the world. And then 3, it gives me the skills and abilities and resources to actually go fucking make this happen. And I would say that over and over, you know?
Yeah, it's mindset.
It is. It's mind. I program myself that way.
Yeah, that's all that stuff is. And so people don't understand, if you don't have the right mindset, you're not going to end up being successful at something, right? Because you're going to start, you're going to stop, you're going to jump around. Oh, it didn't work for me for, 1 week this week, and I'm going to start this other thing. And then so they never find that thing that they can actually become good at. And so it's just that mindset of like trying to train yourself to just do the same thing over and over again. Tell yourself you can do it. And then you eventually get there and something will break free. And then you'll actually go, I'm actually really good at this task that you were talking to yourself over and over and over again every day.
Yeah,
And so,
integrating it.
yeah.
Like, this is it, man. This is my purpose right now.
Yeah.
And I'm scattered all over the place, so I need that singular focus. But I think why I like your podcast is because as an investor, as an entrepreneur, the most important investment is your mind.
Yep.
Your mind and body.
Yep.
And like, that is the thing where if you don't slow down, and I'm learning this now, I'm same age as you, 43. Everything that got me to this point the last 20 years isn't going to get me to the next point of where I want to go in my career, because that skill of just obsessive work nature, of work ethic is great. But I was moving so fast. And if you don't slow down and really, really get clear in your mind what you want to do, what you want to create, no one else can give it to you. And the thing that I found is that I built this persona and this identity that I'm my business, and I'm chasing and grabbing these things to fill me up. But if I'm not healthy in my mind and I'm not healthy in my body, then nothing else is going to make it work, and nothing's going to fulfill me. And that, we can get into it, but it just creates a lot of addictive behavior where you don't even know you're an addict. You're working like crazy just to fill the void of just not feeling great when you're just being who you are. And I sacrificed a lot of relationships with girls in my life, with friends, where it just was all focused on work. And I don't want to live that way anymore.
You kind of have to be obsessed when you're young to get good at something, right?
Yes.
And so, but yeah, as you get older and to scale your business, what got you there is not going to be the same thing to scale it to 100 million, 200 million, $300 million.
Yeah.
You were telling yourself you were going to make $3,000 a month in positive cash flow.
Yeah.
What did you do at that point?
It took a while. So, but luckily I had a couple call me. They wanted to buy a house. I got my first commission. I had to split it with the broker 50-50. So I made $6,000, but at least it got me some traction. And then from that point though, the market was jumping. You know, it was 2002, 2003. And you could buy a house with no income, no assets, right? The no job, the ninja loans.
No doc.
No, yeah.
I use those.
Yeah.
It was beneficial for me, but not for a lot of other people.
Yeah. In the beginning, it was beneficial for me too. You know, I caught the market right where I was buying houses before people weren't really buying them at scale in Vegas. Me and a buddy of mine bought a house that was 4 bedrooms. We got it for like $130,000. We had 6 guys in there, 6 guys renting, 1 guy in the closet, 2 guys sharing a room. It was a shit show in that house. But we flipped it. I made 60 or 70 grand as my portion. We flipped it for 300. And I went out and was an animal. Like, I thought success looked like pleasure, fun, you know, and I'm in the belly of the beast in Vegas. So I was, you know, wanting to show off to my friends, wanting to get a nice car, wanting to go to the clubs, wanted to drink. And it was about a 1 or 2 week period. And I just buried myself into the ground from this experience where I thought this is, you know, life's all about pleasure and fun. And it wasn't. And also, the market started to turn. So it was declining in 2007. I could see the writing on the wall where I had a bunch of rentals. I had a bunch of guys that got loans with me, and we bought a bunch of houses. And that declined where we couldn't cover the notes. I couldn't cover any of my mortgage payments.
If they were mainly rentals, were you just renting them too cheap, or did you just have a bunch of them that were empty? How did you end up getting caught?
Oh, in Vegas all the values went up so high. I bought with negative cash flow or at break-even cash flow. The rental pool just opened up where there was so much supply because everybody was buying a house. Rents went through right down rock bottom, and there was no renters out there because there was so much supply. So that was just a ticking time bomb where, you know, I didn't even know what I was doing. I couldn't hold on. I couldn't even patch it. It was all falling apart. So right at 2008 was like the low where I had IRS liens, I had foreclosures, I had credit card defaults. I was completely done. And that was probably the best experience of my whole life because I had to live on my buddy's couch and I had to start over and I had to figure out what I really wanted to do.
Did you file for bankruptcy?
No.
Okay.
No, we did short sales, or I worked it out with the bank, or there was deficiencies that I had to pay off over time. Worked out something with the IRS where I made my payments over time. But that sobered me up. One, it made me realize one, I have to have an edge. Like I can't just go out and buy a house that's not negative cash flowing and hope the market's going to go up and flip it. And then two, I got to be doing something that everyone else can't do. I got to figure out, and commercial real estate is the way. I can go in there and be creative. I can find ways to add value. I can find markets that other people aren't targeting, and then eventually I can do construction and I can manage these assets differently than other people. And that's what I did with storage there to work on different management structures. So, but in the beginning, it was just singular focus. Mobile home parks make money, period. Like there's affordable housing issue in the country. These things are the redheaded stepchild of the real estate industry. Nobody really wanted them because there was a crash in mobile homes in the late 90s that was due to a financing issue where banks were financing anybody to get a mobile home. All the defaults happened in mobile homes. So banks in general just said parks too. We don't want to touch any part of them in the mid 2000s, late 2000s. So that was my opportunity to jump on that because I saw the window in the market that they were undervalued.
So you had all the rentals, you almost lost everything. You were able to do short sales, barely get out of that. How did you get into the mobile homes? Like, how did you buy your first one? Did you actually close on it or did you wholesale it?
Yeah. Once again, it was a course. So some guy, great friend still to this day, his name's Dave Reynolds. He opened up the mobile home park store. It was a really antiquated site, but you could put a mobile home park up for sale, sell it there. It's kind of like a LoopNet for mobile home parks. And he sold educational courses out of there. I bought the course, I read it, listened to the old CDs, and I'm like, man, this makes a lot of sense. And I went to another commercial real estate education seminar. It was through that wealth seminar thing that Donald Trump was doing years ago, Wealth Expo. So this guy was speaking there. His name's Scott Scheel in the Commercial Academy. And that gave me the understanding, okay, commercial is where I want to be. And then I quickly got into commercial, figured I don't have an edge. We were talking about the good old boys club of retail, office, industrial, or apartments. Like the market wasn't really, it wasn't falling even through the crash, not as dramatically as single families. So I didn't have any experience. I didn't have an edge. So the mobile home parks was the key. And I asked him, I said, hey, I want to get rich in this asset class. What do I do? And he's like, well, you got to go out and find deals. That's the key. We all know that in real estate. So he sold me a list of all, at the time, 40,000 mobile home parks in the country. And I took that list. I had a little office in the side of this house I was staying in temporarily. And I just banged the phones. And he said, if you find good deals, I'll buy them from you. So I hit those phones really hard. I took everything I learned from ADT and from my realtor training, and I hit it with commercial. And I made, at least 6 hours a day I made cold calls. So it was a couple 100 to 300 calls a day. And I did that for almost a decade. And that was just the only way I could find out how to crawl out of that hole. And it was hard because over time, in the beginning, I didn't even know what a deal was. But the fact that I was sending him 5, 10, 15 deals a week, and he's like, gee, and these are
so many.
Yeah, these are motivated sellers that are in different parts of the country, especially here in the Midwest. He's starting to look at me and saying, wow, like I'm going to help train this kid a little bit to coach him up on what we're really looking for.
So how were you making the money though? So when you found a deal, were you just giving him the deal or were you actually getting it under contract and then selling it to him for a higher price?
So in the beginning, I bought a deal in Oklahoma and I did the double closing where I bought it, locked it up in contract, advertised it on the time. I think it was on Craigslist or something. Someone bought it for me, did the double closing, and I pocketed 30 or 40 grand, which was great, but it wasn't sustainable because I tried doing that again and other people were trying to backdoor me and they'll just go buy the deal from someone else, from the actual seller, because they knew I wasn't the actual owner. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't trust who I was trying to assign the deals to get a fee. And Dave was teaching me this is what we want, and he ended up paying me an assignment fee. I would get anywhere between 2 and 6% of the purchase price, depending on how small or how large it was. Mm-hmm. And then I knew, okay, I just want to stick with these guys. Like I can count on them. I know they're going to actually get the deal done. And then I'm going to be able to at least build my bankroll to have enough to be able to survive. But that took years. I mean, in 2010, I made 10 grand total and I worked 300 days. And that was on, that was getting one assignment fee on a really crappy little park in the middle of nowhere, Minnesota, Pipestone, Minnesota, taking some sketchy flight on this little airline and buying that park and getting that fee. And that was all I did. The market was dead that year. So it was brutal. So yeah, there was a long road, but then I was luckily, because I knew the owner financing piece and I started to understand about the basics of tax and how a lot of these legacy owners of assets, especially in commercial real estate, they have such a low basis and they're going to get nailed on taxes at the end, right? Because if the audience doesn't know, like every year you depreciate your asset, it lowers your basis, right?
Yeah, for somebody that doesn't know, whenever you take the depreciation every year, when you go to resell it, you're going to recoup the depreciation if you don't do a 1031.
That's
right?
it.
Yeah.
So these guys end up at the end of their career and
They need the money.
Yeah. They want,
they need the cash flow, right?
Yeah. Well, or they don't want to put another 200 grand into the asset to get it up and fixed up the way it should be. And their family has no more interest in it. And it's tough. I mean, you're dealing with the bottom of the barrel tenants on a lot of these old ratty parks. So they want to sell and get that cash flow, like you said, that stream of income. So they would carry the note for me, and I was able to negotiate some really low down payments because the parks were so difficult to manage and the market wasn't that hot at the time.
Where did you get the money to go and rehab the assets and get it back up to where you can raise rents?
Man, it was bootstrapped.
Okay.
It was so. Luckily, I did a few deals with Dave, and we were partners. I would keep 20% of the deal or so, and he would put in the capital, and I would just have my equity position to go out and help manage it, to help hire people, help figure out vendors. And I learned that for a year or two, but then I knew I had to get my own asset because I wasn't getting short-term cash flow. There wasn't a lot from it while we were trying to improve the asset. So it was 2012. I was like 30 years old, and I found an owner in New York where every year I'd go visit my family in New Hampshire. I would say hi to everyone in the summer, and I was cold calling this guy. The year before, I went out and met him and his wife out at their lake house up in Watertown, New York, and they wanted 800 grand for this 71 unit mobile home park. I offered 600 grand because I wasn't going to make the mistake of not cash flowing out of the gate, never again. And then he ended up getting sick a year later. The wife was really distressed. I built a really good rapport with these guys, very respectful, showed them why the offer was lower. And then she ended up saying, you know what, I just got to sell it. I got to sell it right now because I'm afraid I can't manage this thing and Everett might die. So I offered them 615 grand and it was only 15 grand down. And they carried the 6,000 on a note, 6% interest for 7 years, interest only. Remember that $3,000 a month payment to her. Yeah, and that was it. That was the actual time I got that first goal of $3,000 a month to cover my basic bills, and I was living lean, no dating, no partying, and that was the catalyst that helped me learn the business, manage my own asset, get some experience under my belt, and have enough to pay the bills.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to hear that it took you that long to get that one piece under contract.
Yeah.
So you had been working on it for years, really building the relationship. And then that actually happens a lot. Like sometimes people will say no, and then they'll either get sick or pass away. And then the kids, you're their first call.
That's
It's
it.
like, hey, do you want to buy this property? We don't have the money to maintain it. It actually happened on the building next door where Gentry was going to buy years and years. Hey, if you ever want to sell it. And he's like, I'm never selling.
Yeah.
And then soon as the guy, I think he got put in a home, all the kids were like, we want to sell it tomorrow. And so she was the first call.
That's it. Fortune's in the follow-up.
Yeah,
That's what I tell my guys, all
Yeah.
my sales guys.
So anyways, just super important thing to learn that you hustled for that long and then finally got that one deal under contract. It's not like you just made a couple cold calls and then got all these deals under contract.
Yeah, I got into real estate in 2001,
Yep.
and that was 2012.
Yep.
So that was a long time. Yeah, a lot of lessons learned.
So what happened after the first deal? So you had that one under contract. You had started getting a little bit of cash flow to cover your bills. What was the next deal? What did that look like?
Still hustling, still trying to find more deals to get fees, but then I'm out there trying to buy my own deals with owner financing, and then I make a stupid mistake. I go buy another deal in Indian Springs, Nevada. It's this really little ratty town outside of Vegas. Rough, kind of like Bullhead, like we talked about, way smaller. And where I made the mistake was I owned the majority of the mobile homes, and that was a nightmare because now I'm dealing with tenants, toilets, different eviction laws, and the deferred maintenance.
What's the default rate on like a mobile home park as compared to something else?
Well, there's D assets and A assets.
I
So
got you. Okay.
yeah, this was a rough one. If you have an A class asset, it's almost nothing. It's
Okay.
less than 1% because people own their own home and they want to be secure. They just want to live affordably. And these rough assets with park owned homes and in drug infested areas, I mean, it could be 30, 40, 50% where they're just coming and going all the time and you can't collect. So I had to learn that lesson, and that was when I raised my first amount of money, and I went to a real estate conference it was a cruise out in Honduras or down in Belize, and Robert Kiyosaki was there, and I met a lot of different investors in that group, and they were trying to pitch us on buying some Belize condo down there, the hosts. But along that bus ride, I met a couple out of Seattle, and they worked for Amazon at the time, or Microsoft and Amazon. And I wasn't in a good mood. I was on a bunch of crappy flights and I was so tired, but I struck a good conversation with them. We hit it off really well. They wanted to invest outside of single family. They loved the story about mobile homes, and they put 80 grand into this park. And unfortunately, it wasn't going well. We weren't getting cash flow. Everything was just challenging. My manager was stealing from me, gambling in Vegas. My maintenance guy was on drugs all the time. And I was just trying to figure it all out, running back and forth out there.
And this is a remote too, so which makes it even harder.
It
right?
was. I mean, I was in Vegas, so I was running out there an hour each way or hour and a half. And it was just not sustainable. And it was such a waste of time. But the best thing I could do was I talked to the original owner that financed the property for me. I said, this is bad. This is going upside down. You know, it was her husband that passed away that caused her to want to sell it to me. I said, we got to figure this out. I want to pay off your note, but we got to discount it because this is a nightmare property. So would you consider taking a bit of a discount? I'll pay it off right now because I had a long-term note with her. And she reluctantly agreed over time. And I was able to find a buyer to help pay a lower price than I even paid just to get out of the asset. I think that's a lesson people need to know when to cut your losses. Because the problem in real estate, as you know, is if you're upside down, it's a long, hard road to crawl out. You can't just change a few things like in a business and actually promote more sales, right? I mean, it is a long road and you're trying to cover that note every month. But the lesson I learned from that was, we had a 50-50 split with the investor. But I took some of my own money that I earned. I took the proceeds of the sale and I paid them back. I think I made $60 on the sale, gave them their full $80,000 back. And it wasn't a great experience for them, but the fact that I made them whole and they got a little bit of cash flow along the way, it really, really was a powerful relationship that they didn't invest for a couple years after that. But I kept just sharing what I was going through. And then now, I mean, they've invested, multiple, up to possibly, 10 million. Like they have been and they've referred a lot of people, and we've done a lot of business over the last 12 years. So it's just, that long-term relationship game and living by your core values and your ethics.
Yeah, they saw your character at the time.
That's it.
Through the worst time, right?
That's it, through the worst time. Yeah, and I didn't cut and run and try to keep a little money, and that put me in a tough spot. But that lesson was so valuable again because I never did that again. To a degree, yeah, but I never made that same mistake twice, and it was rough because in the beginning, when anyone's starting out, if you're buying any property, you're gonna have to buy some of the stuff nobody else wants. So there's gonna be landmines around that. So it's the toughest thing, right, to make that first million because you're just trying to figure out, how am I gonna navigate this when I'm playing in the worst part of the game?
So that asset, you actually own the homes on the property.
The majority.
And so on the next ones moving forward, did you actually you only invested in the land and then lease the spaces out to
That's
people?
right. Yeah, that was key. So I rode that for as long as I could, where I felt like the market was shifting and it was getting much harder with competition coming in. A lot of sophisticated investors, private equity, they were coming in and buying parks and really jacking up the prices. And I just couldn't see, how am I going to make these pencil? I couldn't flip the parks. But I did accumulate equity with my partner over the years in a bunch of parks where instead of getting a fee, I just put the money back into the asset. So I was a 30, 40, 50% owner, and I would go source it. So I had 12 or 13 assets with them in around the Midwest that it took years to accumulate. But I knew if I don't have control over my destiny and I don't have my own income coming in, I can't build a company. So that was the time where I said, okay, let's do an equity swap. I'll sell all my equity to you guys on these assets. You guys buy me out, and then I'll buy you guys out of a handful of assets in Vegas that I want to own outright. And that was the first time I could get a loan. And I actually got a $10.2 million Bank of America CMBS loan. And I couldn't get a mortgage a month earlier I couldn't buy a house, but I was able to get that type of loan. And I had defaults through Bank of America.
Because you had performing assets, so right? Is that how you got it?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I was able to sign recourse because I had a track record. I showed them I've been buying these the last 7 years. And I had equity in the deal. I took $3 million of equity as the down payment, and we were able to get the deal done. And that really shifted my whole career.
So for somebody that is thinking about investing in mobile home parks, or they wanted to, should they not invest in the ones where you actually own the homes on there? It should only be land?
I would say
ground lease. You're going to
correct.
Lease,
yeah, land lease. I would say 90% of investors stick with land lease communities. If you're in a great market and you want to be hands-on, you can buy the homes and sell them back to the tenants, or you can improve the homes and sell them. I mean, in California, these are high-end markets that you can make that work, but the majority do not own the home.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, what we do now, not to talk about mobile home parks the whole time, but the real key is in buying brand new homes, putting them in the community. You have a nice open yards, big lots. If you can buy a park like that and then sell brand new homes, and owners have that vested interest in their home where they have a down payment, they have a nice job, that's how you really improve communities. And that's really what I focus on now.
Okay. So after that, you put the $3 million in equity into the Bank of America loan.
Yeah.
What happened after that?
So $65,000 a month was my principal and interest and reserve payment there with B of A. And I had to figure out how to manage them. Like, it was all on me at that point. And I actually was able to roll an apartment complex with that through another owner of a park that I bought. And so I had this 4 parks, 1 apartment complex. The other, that was up in Winnemucca, Nevada. It was this mining town up in the north. And I was just figuring it out, like hiring an assistant, trying to figure out how to get the online rent roll going so people can pay by check through the online, and I found a Hispanic manager to speak Spanish. Working on I was helping do the paving myself at a lot of the parks, just doing all the cleanup, fix up, getting the businesses stabilized, but learning the business. That was the critical lesson. And the thing I learned from that is I had to stop doing all of the other activities of constantly trying to source deals and find new deals. I had to sacrifice and slow down the growth, but I didn't do that immediately. I was out on the road still trying to do a million deals and try to manage these parks. I had to pick one or the other to get the experience and the systems in place. And I hired a lot of really challenging people that leveraged me, where they knew Jeremiah needs me. He's not here looking at the business. I'm going to exploit that right now. So I'm going to ask for more money, another $100,000 on my salary. I'm not really going to tell him what I'm doing on the parks and show him any systems. They didn't even know the systems themselves that well. And the business was unraveling because I was trying to continue to grow so aggressively and try to maintain and build the assets that I had.
Yeah, instead of focusing on operations and really trying to dial in the net profit for the park.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So I figured out, I got to stop. I got to stop all of it. I got to slow down, and I just got to get a foothold on what I have.
You're like me. I have that same problem. I'm like, grow fast. But you do have you have to get your operations in line too, to be able to scale that fast. If not, you'll run into all the problems that you're talking about.
That's it. You can't do everything at once.
No.
No matter how bad you want it, you got to prioritize. So, I was at a real estate event, and I did a talk in front of everybody, and a friend from high school was there, and we grew up together since I was 6 years old. We played soccer together, and he was in construction. He had a GC background, and he just started coming in. He's like, man, I want to learn commercial. I want to do this. He didn't ask for any check. He was just trying to give. And it was critical because I needed help, and I didn't have the money. On those $10 million assets, it was $13 million assets. I was generating less than $100,000 of net profit after I was paying everything and all the maintenance and all the people. So it was like no return on equity at all. So he came in there at a key time, helped me get everything. We didn't know what we were doing that well, but he helped me get everything handled and on a stable foundation. And at that point, one of my managers left me in the middle of the night, said, "Hey, I'm going to California. I need 50 grand as a payment to help you finish this project." And I wasn't going to tolerate it. I'm like, I'm not paying you to just stay around until I sell the assets. So I think that's the other thing that entrepreneurs always, I think, need to focus on is whatever you settle for, you'll get, right? Whatever your standard is the results that you're going to receive. And I couldn't do it. So I just said, forget it, man. I'm going to go do this, manage these myself. And I went all in. And then finally, I was able to find a buyer. I put it on the market, sold the assets, and was able to secure $10 million, get my $3 million out, get the $7 million of profit that I generated, and have this real nest egg that I could breathe for a second, and be able to start to build a real company.
Yeah, real estate's pretty cash intensive most of the time, right?
Oh,
so,
yeah.
A lot of money you make off properties, you end up investing in more properties. So although you have a ton of equity, you always have probably pretty low cash in most of the time.
Real estate rich cash floor. Yeah. But what's funny is there's no time to rest in this business. As you know, when you make that money, you got to find a way to offset it right away. So yeah, we closed, and I already had while we were closing, I was trying to line up 4 or 5 properties to be able to offset it and go into to create depreciation. And there was, so I was able to line a lot of properties up, offset a lot of that tax, be able to put some money in my pocket.
Same thing, mobile home parks though.
Yes, and I made bad investments too. I had to offset some tax. I made an investment into a office building in Puerto Rico through a friend of mine. It had Social Security, National Social Security as a tenant. I thought this is super safe. And that thing just unraveled. One of the other tenants was a trade school that was embezzling money, that went out of business after 40 years of being in business. But through the Obama administration, they audited all that. Power bills went through the roof in Puerto Rico. Everything just fell apart. So that 300 grand that I used to try to offset taxes, still gone to this day. It's probably gone forever. Still have the asset, but it's an important lesson. Don't let the tax dog wag the tail, or whatever it is, the tax tail wag the dog. Yeah. Yep. So that was a huge mistake. So I learned it also. Don't ever make an investment decision just for taxes.
Plus, stick to what you're really good at.
That's right.
You knew how to really make money in mobile home parks. Don't go start investing in this and giving other people money. You're already good at it.
That's right. And years earlier, me and a buddy tried to get into gaming, where I actually got a gaming license. We bought a gas station, and we were trying to learn how to have slot machines. We had them, and that was just a totally different business. And I spent a lot of time learning operations, learning point of sale, learning margins, which was valuable, but it was just another lump in the road, another bump where that was a lot of time wasted that I could have been focusing on this key thing that would have got me farther ahead.
That you just made $10 million from.
That's right. Yeah.
Do more of that.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah. So that
you and every other entrepreneur, I did the same thing. Like you'll make a bunch of money, then you think you're a genius, and you're like, oh, I can do all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then a lot of it doesn't end up working out. But
no.
Yeah, you just got to stick to what you knew. You know how to make money in mobile home parks. You just made $10 million. Definitely proof, right, that you can go and do this over and over again.
Finally.
Yeah,
it was proof. And I think the thing that I know guys like us have is we're so hard on ourselves. Like we beat the hell out of ourselves. Like, you should have done it this way. You should work harder. You got to look better. You gotta perform. And that's an obsession, and it's not a bad thing, but it can get so unhealthy when you just, for me, doing this work that I'm doing now, you feel so empty inside, and you feel that was part of getting over that anger and getting over that insecurity that, like, I am not the money I have. I'm not the status that I have. That's a hard thing to learn as a man trying to make your way in the world, because, the lifestyle I want to live, to have freedom and to have a beautiful girlfriend and to have, the ability to take care of my family and give to them, my parents, like, you got to hustle hard. So it's just, I thought that's all I was, and people won't love me if I don't have this identity of being successful. And it's just a very slippery slope, because if the business is never guaranteed, and there's going to be hard times, and if it falls apart, your mental world unravels, and you're going to look for anything to help fill you up. And it's been a grind, and we'll get into the story more, but it was really challenging when things don't go right in business. and things aren't even going right in relationships. And then things aren't going right with, I don't have any hobbies. I don't have any friends anymore. And I'm sitting around like, what, this is not where I want to live. But, you know, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see that I was living this life because all I was trying to do was validate that I'm going to be successful and I have to be successful. And it comes from probably my dad and mom, you know, needing the love from them and needing the love from other people.
I thought the same way, but I don't know where mine really came from. But same way, I'd sit there by myself and I'm like, I have to be successful. I want to do this. I had all these numbers in my mind that were just arbitrary that I made up, that if I needed to hit those numbers or if not, I wasn't successful.
Right. And then you don't feel like you fit in. You feel like an imposter. Like, I belong to this group. It's all in our head. Just so much chaos in our head.
And probably even after you made the 10 million, you're probably still doubting a lot of stuff. It's like
a ton.
Yeah. Am I good as I thought I was? Was I deserve to make this $10 million? And then you made some bad investments after that. And you have to deal with that. You're like, okay, maybe I need to stick to my lane.
Yeah. Yeah. And
so what happened after you? So you get the 10 million, you made a couple bad investments. What did you do with the majority of it? Did you save some of it? Did you invest in new parks?
Yeah. Luckily, along the way with buying some of the parks, I was able to buy a handful or one or two storage facilities because the owners of the parks had storage. My partners didn't want any part of storage. Storage is a management intensive endeavor. So an old guy sold me his storage units up in northern Nevada near the park. And that's where I got my hands involved with learning storage. And it was a slow time. Like, that market had tons of storage. There was an old guy that kept building buildings, another guy. You could never raise rents. It was infinite supply because the land was cheap and the buildings were cheap. So I didn't make a lot of money on that one, but I was able to get him to owner finance, 100% finance on those two assets I bought. But I told him, I'm going to put a 200 grand into this and I'm going to improve them. And your collateral, the actual properties, are going to be a lot better than when you left them off to me. You sold them to me. So he was good. We had a lot of trust and I built a lot of rapport with him. I always made my payments and learned the business. But then I could see, parks were getting overvalued. Storage, there's an opportunity in secondary, tertiary markets, these drive-up facilities that are just ratty and beat up. You see them along the highway. Like, this is a fragmented industry out there.
It was. And I think where most things that happen with storage is like owners get old and they're scared to raise the rent. That's the biggest thing you see in storage.
That's it.
And that's where you can go create the most value, right? They've managed it for the last 20 years, but they're like, the rents are the same like they were 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And they're just scared to raise them because they think everybody's going to leave.
That's right.
And so we bought a lot like that to where we would go buy and double the rents.
Right.
And overnight,
That's
you create that much value. And in commercial that if you can create that much value off the cash flow and make that much equity just like that.
Yeah.
You just go in and double the rents. I didn't do anything. Of course, we usually fix up the place too while we're doing that. We don't just double the rents, but
you don't have to make it on the market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're out there. They're a little bit harder to find, but that's where you generally see it, is like the older owner never wanted to raise rents. And then those are the best deals to actually find because you already have tenants in there. And if you do raise the rents, what we found is like probably 10% max will leave.
Yeah.
Like max.
Yeah.
And so
it's
pretty easy to fill up
20%.
10%. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Especially if you're making that much cash flow right after.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the fallacy that people think is that if you're full, you're fully stabilized, you're maximizing value. And that, it's not in commercial, right? The rents are especially with something that is such a short lease period for month-to-month leases, with storage. So you can turn that around quickly. And that's what the big players do. I mean, we're friends with all of the big REITs and that dynamic pricing. I mean, when I visited Extra Space out in their corporate office, they got 11 guys from MIT that could probably shoot a rocket to the moon, and they're constantly assessing pricing and that perfect place to be on where the rents need to be. So it's quite a business.
You bought the storage. Well, you learned the storage from buying the mobile home park.
Yep.
And then, so does that lead you into more storage?
Yeah. I doubled down. So that's basically what I did. I mean, the majority of that cash went 100% back into storage. I bought a lot of value. I went back to the Northeast too, because I knew on the West Coast, there was no yields. It was very competitive. A lot of the big companies, big public REITs are out here. And I could find a lot of older assets built in the 80s and the late 70s, go out there and improve those assets. Not a lot of investors were targeting the New England area where my dad's from. And that was the opportunity for me to get in there and we went on a rampage. I mean, we bought 20 deals in 1 year, 25 the next year, 30 the next year. So we were on a tear, it just going back to the basics.
And this is before you had the fund. Is this you by yourself or?
Oh, so yeah, no, actually that's right. So after that big exit, I did open a fund. That was the first time where I thought, okay, mobile home parks and storage, I got a good track record and I can scale this. I don't need to now individually pitch one deal at a time to the investors that I have. Now I'm going to get into the fund starting in 2020. And that's where we're going to raise this capital in a pool and then go out and then deploy it and pay the investors a 10% preferred return and then profits.
Do y'all use any bank leverage, or are you just using investor money as equity, and then going out and getting 50% leverage, or how does it work on them?
Yeah, the only way to really juice those returns to make sure they got 20-25% ROI, I had to go guarantee the debt.
Yeah.
So I would go in and get 70 to 80% loan to value on the asset. And then the equity would come from the investors, and I would sign recourse on the debt, keeping the interest rate low, and rates kept going down. And that's what allowed us to actually create such high returns because of that leverage. If I went with a regular institutional bank, it would be, like you said, 50, 60% leverage, non-recourse, meaning I'm not guaranteeing the loan, but the returns aren't that strong, especially when you're adding all that value. The less money you can put down, the more you're going to make for your investors.
Well, also, I'm sure the investors, like if I were to invest in a deal, which I don't normally invest passively, but if he was personally guaranteeing the note, I would feel pretty good about giving him my money.
Yeah.
Right? Because not a lot of people do that.
That's right. Yeah. So that was the pitch. And in terms of these assets were smaller, they weren't institutional grade. They were outside of big markets, so they weren't like the sexy markets of core LA or Boston. And that was the only financing available, is building these relationships with community banks. And it's something that everyone here that really wants to start in commercial real estate, if you know what you're going to invest in, or you have a target asset class, those credit unions and those regional community banks, the ones that aren't the big nationals, setting up a business account with them. I bought a CD in the very beginning. I would buy CDs for $5,000, and then I would pull a personal loan out on the CD, right? And just that was the collateral for the personal loan, because they wouldn't give me a loan without it, and just use that pay down that loan, and then once I pay it down, I get my CD back. So it's something to really listen to if you want to go out and build a relationship. You got to do it way ahead of time with the bank. You got to know what they like to lend on.
Yep.
And then when you need the money, they'll actually give you the money, except unless you wait to the last minute, and they're going to look at you like, no, we're not giving you money. We don't know you.
Yep.
So yeah, personally guaranteeing the loans was critical. And then the second piece that really helped accelerate the growth and add a lot of value was the construction piece. So storage is a relatively simple product to build. You got site work, you got a concrete slab, you got an actual metal building, and you got some electrical in there.
Are all your units, are they mainly just all automated? Like, you don't have a bunch of employees that run the facilities or anything?
So no, nothing's fully automated for us because we're so spread out over the Northeast. We have a call center, which is automated to a degree. And this is fast forward. We figured this out where we have a really good Filipino call staff. And then we have a corporate office in New Hampshire, and we have managers that oversee them. But the maintenance piece is still a big piece for us because we have 3 million square feet and 20,000 units. You're constantly doing auctions. You're constantly doing lockouts. So that logistical piece is really important. And through this process of buying one of these facilities that I found from someone on a mailer, I just sent a mailer up in New Hampshire, and this woman called me back. It was a small 100-unit facility, but it was on 5 acres, and it was across from a Walmart and Tractor Supply. Not a big town, though, at all. I knew that everyone from Vermont is going to go to this Walmart Tractor Supply right over the border in New Hampshire, and there's a lot of traffic here. So I'm going to buy it, I'm going to expand it, and then I'm going to grow it. And that was where I met my partner, actually. Her daughter was an engineer for one of the military contractors in town. She hated her job, didn't want to be in corporate America anymore, loved her mom's storage business, and they stayed on as a partner, a minority partner. But then that built the relationship where she's like, she's good at operations, she's good at SOPs, and I'm not, I'm not the best. Yeah, so I needed that player in there, and then she helped us really scale. So I had my construction partner, I had her in operations, and that really gave me the bandwidth to be able to go out and add tons of value, manage it, and get returns.
Is she still with you today?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
Awesome.
Still there. Yeah, we've grown so much as a partnership together. But that model of finding facilities all over the Northeast or even all over the country, but I ended up just focusing on this area because we knew it the best. I bought a lot of other facilities in South Carolina, and it's nightmare stories of just the stuff you inherit. So that was good because we were able to scale quickly. And once we did the construction, she was on top of the management. COVID hit. And when COVID hit, we were concerned what was going to happen. But everybody flooded out of New York City, out of parts of Connecticut, out of Boston. Everyone was buying houses in Maine and Vermont and New Hampshire, and it just filled our facilities up. So our industry benefited, and storage went up year over year for 2 years. 15% rent growth, 20% rent growth, 30, 40% in 2 years.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It was crazy. And now we're on the hangover. So yeah, like now it's not the same as it was.
Storage was selling it like a 4 and 5 cap for a while.
Yeah.
Like, when the frenzy was going on during pandemic.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
We caught it a little ahead of the curve. We were already building, and we were caught in the curve too. It slowed down some of our buildings, and it was starting to get a lot more competitive, but we already had the database, already had my sales guys. We already had a lot of relationships. So we were buying while the market was going up and still catching it at the right time.
How many units do you have today, or how many, I guess you're going to call it doors?
Between 75 and 80 facilities, because some are in construction right now. And that's about 20,000 doors. And my goal, so to fast forward, I thought I was going to have the big exit where I found one of the big players, and they were courting us at a lot of these industry trade shows. They're in Vegas, and they have bought other operators like me that have 50, 100 facilities, and they put them under their corporate brand. And then the market shifted, right? Yeah. Stock market crashed or not doing well. Interest rates went up. So that opportunity no longer was available. But actually through that process, I realized I want to have a solid, stable, durable real estate firm. And in order to do that, it takes finance, it takes sales, it takes operations, it takes construction or CapEx.
Yeah, if you sold it, you'd be starting all over.
It's all gone.
All your people, everything that you've been building over these years.
That's it. All the payroll fees go away. So we built managing these assets, one, to have control, so we knew we were going to deliver on the value, but two, because we need that reoccurring revenue so that we can pay our staff. And the cash flow alone, you can't just use cash flow in the beginning because there isn't a whole lot. So I just, for me, now I'm in this phase of life where I don't need to grow and buy 100 more facilities. What I want to do is just have a really secure portfolio that we keep managing, we keep improving, we keep cash flowing. And that's what investors want. They just want that durable check that comes in every single month or quarter.
In any market, right?
In any market. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, bulletproof, the whole thing. So I realized I have to be a good operator. I got to be a good CEO. And in the beginning, it was all about deals. I was a deal guy. I was a sales guy. And that was a transition for me to learn how to be the gunslinging deal guy that loves the high of the deal and traveling and, negotiating, and had to step more into the role of a strategist and slowing down and really allocating resources where they need to be allocated to produce the best result for the company. And it wasn't about growth. Over the last year, we've done 3 transactions instead of 20 or 25 because it's not the time. And 2 is we have to allocate the time and energy and funds towards the things that are going to long-term create the company to be safe and secure no matter what happens in the next 10 years.
Yep. So now you're to the point where everything's dialed in, and now you just need to scale.
I mean, it dialed in to a degree, but yeah. I'm like you. We have high standards and you want it perfect. But
but you have your operation like pretty secure now.
Yeah.
And so now it's time to go and scale, which is pretty awesome place to be.
It is, but when the time's right.
Yeah.
So raising money's tougher right now. Storage is going through a tough spot. Mobile homes parks are in a tough spot, but they're actually leveling out with value. So what was a big help for me was 2.5 years ago, adopting that EOS system and the book Traction by Gino Wickman.
Explain that to people that don't know what
it is. Yeah, it's called the Entrepreneur Operating System, and the book Traction is the one that outlines what that means. But essentially what it meant for me, it's identifying clear targets or goals and then identifying the priorities around what do we need to do quarter by quarter to get to this goal. And then building a leadership team around that, and then having clear accountabilities This is the 5 things that you have to do well. All those other things, because as everyone knows, this day and age, you're getting bombarded with every freaking notification. These are the things you have to achieve. And these are the accountabilities that we're going to hold you to on your goals every single quarter. And that's how we're going to make decisions as a company. And I thought we had a vision. I thought we had a culture, and we didn't. I didn't put the time in, and I didn't know how to communicate it, and I didn't clarify it myself. So clarifying the actual culture that I want to have helped me eliminate a lot of toxic people that were great at their job, but had just like the Antonio Brown issue, you know, when he comes into a team and he's a prima donna and he's a great skilled receiver, but he makes it a toxic environment for everyone else because it's all about him.
Yeah, everyone goes through that same thing. It's like you have someone that is a high performer, they're really good at their job, but they're like kind of tearing down half your workforce. And so everybody goes through that, and you're like, well, I don't really want to get rid of them. They're just so good. And so you get scared. And so you think if you get rid of them, everything's going to fall apart. And then when you do, it's like so great.
It
and
is.
Then everybody's like, oh my God, this is better. And the whole workplace becomes a better environment.
That's right.
And everybody else starts doing better.
Right.
Yeah. So you can't be scared to let that person go if, even if they are, a higher performer, but they're destroying your whole operation, you have to get rid of them.
Yeah. And I'd have to say, I'm going to reemphasize that. Like everyone listening,
it's hard.
It is hard because when you're comfortable in any relationship, when you're comfortable and they meet a lot of needs, but it's not the right person. It's not the right person. Yeah. And it's not a fit for you. You got to cut loose, and it's going to create a lot of stress in the short term because you have to relearn that job.
I think that's what every business owner's issue is. They're like, well, I don't have time to train somebody. I don't have time to do this. So, that's where they get stuck.
That's
and
it.
They keep that same person there instead of just going through the little bit of short-term pain, and then everything else gets so much better.
That's it. And I had that happen so many times in my career. And I finally figured out, though, once I can identify what the culture is, and then start to see in people, these people really care about the company and they care about me. These people are loyal. These people are passionate. These people are accountable. They do what they say they're going to do. They have integrity. And they're obsessed with growing and getting better. And they're team players. They're not just looking for what's in it for me. And they have this ego and they don't want to share what they're learning to anyone else. Like all those things I identified, and now I know right away, this is not a fit or this is a fit. And I make bad decisions. We all make tough hiring decisions. But ultimately, that weeding out process created at least a place where we can communicate and go through conflict, because great teams, great companies deal with conflict all the time. Like we were talking the other night about problems are just going to keep showing up over and over and over because that's what we signed up for, to be at this status or this level of wealth. And it just, as these problems compound, one, if you don't have yourself in order where you're grounded and clear on what you want to create and who you are, and then two, you don't have the right people around you that behind your back are going to do things that are going to jeopardize the company or your wealth. Like that is a recipe for disaster. And that all starts with communication with yourself and with other people, and being able to have the trust with each other that we're going to engage in conflict. If we don't agree on a partnership, if we don't agree on this investor structure, or we don't agree on using this capital to go do this in the company, let's go. Let's work through it, and let's outline, okay, how do we compromise here to make sure it's best for the company, not just best for you?
Well, I used to tell Gentry, I'm like, I've never looked back on every single person that we've, had to let go of or fired or terminated, that I've never looked back and like, man, I should have kept that person a little bit longer, like a little bit long. Like you never think that they leave and then you go, oh my God, like
breathe.
They weren't doing this. They weren't doing this. They weren't doing that. And then they were, 5 other people come up to you and go, oh my God, this is what was going on. You just didn't even know.
That's it.
And so you just never, I've never looked back and said, man, I should have kept that person a little bit longer. Like it never happened. Not one time. And so that's what I told her. I tried to give her advice. I'm like, if you really have a gut feeling that person's not right, like just go through with the pain, get rid of it, go with the short-term pain of just training and letting your team figure it out, and you're never going to regret it.
That's it. Yeah. And
easier said than done.
It is.
I'm just saying that, but it's like when you're actually going through it, it's a really hard decision to make.
It is. And, I see your model and my model of over time, you get great partners. And, and you've told me you've had them for 25 years. So
it's a long-term game. So when you do find them, you're like trying to keep the good people for sure.
That's it. Yeah. And that communication works through any issues. And those are so valuable, those partnerships, but you both have to deliver value in different areas. You can't do the same things. And secondly, what EOS really taught me was scorecarding, where understanding there has to be a metric or there has to be some level of performance that I can measure in these different departments, where even if it's real basic, at least one number, so I know, is this person performing or not? And when you're so involved in growing the business, if you don't have that scorecard or dashboard, and financials are great, but it goes beyond that in every other department, then you can't really identify what is going on. Are they performing or not?
And also the employee or the executive, they need clear expectations.
Right.
Because sometimes maybe it's your fault or the business owner's fault for maybe I didn't even set clear expectations of what they need to do.
Many times it's that.
Or they're, even with our business now, it's like, somebody gets fired or the manager lets go of somebody's like, well, did you even train them good enough? Like, did they even know that they were supposed to do this, this, and this? And so we always go in and ask those questions, but that happens too. It's like, you have to make sure that the employee actually knows what they're supposed to be doing, right?
Oh yeah.
And they're trained in that thing that you're trying to get them to do.
Yeah. And the addictive nature of the entrepreneur looking for the next high in business. Yeah. You take on so many things outside of the core strategy of where you're trying to go. Like we talked about, is you're confusing everybody around you.
Yeah.
And that's a real challenge because they don't know where to put their efforts. And then you're wasting all this time and energy. So I think learning to say no, especially as a real estate investor, those are the best deals you never do. Yeah. Just saying no to most of what you see, because that's going to give you the capacity to actually see the great opportunities and take them down without needing to grow and expand and get big.
Yeah. Patience. Like if you just stay patient, there's always going to be more deals. It's just because you missed the one,
right,
doesn't mean the world's going to fall apart, and doesn't mean you're not going to get closer to your goal. And so, yeah, that's tough. It's hard for me. Again, easier said than done. I have to do the same thing. I have to make myself not like, okay, I don't need to do this right now. We have 100 things going on. So it's hard. I get it.
Yeah. And for me now, I'm delving into the education piece where I'm doing my first event November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd in a couple weeks out in San Diego, called the Real Estate Edge Live event. And I'm teaching high-level tax strategy and just learning how do I keep deferring tax and compounding my returns, and all those different nuances that we were talking about earlier about active participation, material participation, like what types of income there are, and then also asset protection. So when you have something, nobody can take it. And you go to these CPAs, you go to these attorneys, and they'll sign you up for a $10,000 program or a package. You don't even know how to use it. You don't know what decisions that they're making on your behalf or guiding you to. And then ultimately you're going to make a poor decision, or you're going to get bad advice because someone else's best interest is in making money for them, not for you. So this is my next path here, and I don't know where this is going to go, but I'm passionate about it. And we'll talk about investments as well. But it's just like, how do you really build that bulletproof portfolio so you have the right expectations and you can year in, year out strategize, okay, this is how I'm going to build my fortune, and I need to do it strategically rather than a bunch of other advisors telling me things I don't understand.
Yeah, I agree with the education stuff. I think it's super helpful. That's the good thing about social media is you have access now to information. It was really tough. When you and I were growing up, you can't just go and see something online and get the information that's out there. And so it's pretty good that you're going to go share that with everyone else now.
Yeah.
Kind of that's where I'm at in my life. I'm trying to share as much as I can. And so we'll probably go down the education path also, but congratulations on all that.
Well, it's a different thing.
Yeah. When's the event?
Yeah.
And then where's the event? And then where else can they find you on social media?
Yeah, it'll probably pass by the time we post this, but it's called Finding Your Edge. It's the CREedge.com, the CREedge.com. And then we'll be doing 1 or 2 a year. Yeah, so this one's in San Diego. Tight group, 50 people max. We booked out the hotel. Healthy. I got all healthy foods coming in. All the food's covered. My tax advisor, my attorney. I got 1031 advisors, self-directed IRA guys. Everybody's coming in. My analysts. And then if they want to find me or they want to engage, Finding Your Edge, the How to Win at the Game of Commercial Real Estate is my book. It's on Audible. It's on Amazon. I wrote it myself. I did it during COVID. No ChatGPT at the time. This was 3 years ago. Yeah, no ghostwriter or anything. And then also LinkedIn is where I do most of my business there. It's Patriot Holdings, and it's Jeremiah Boucher. And then you could find me on Instagram or Facebook too.
Okay, awesome. I'm sure the book has a bunch of tactics and skills that you've learned over the last 30 years or
And
25 year
emotional
career.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So everyone go check it out. I'm sure it has valuable information in there.
Thanks, man.
All right.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Great to have you on.
Yeah.